Welcome to Knowledgeable Aging. I'm your host, Jason Kotar. Joining us today to talk about diagnosed with dementia, what now is Kyrié Carpenter. There she goes. I love it when you do that. Kyrié is a corporate coach and ageism activist. She is the co-founder of the anti-ageism clearinghouse, oldschool.info, and the editor of the Changing Aging blog. She's the author of the book, Healing Dementia, that was featured in the New York Times and has spoken at the International Alzheimer's Association Conference and the Eden Alternative Conference. How are you doing today, Kyrié?
I'm doing well. Happy to be back with you, Jason.
Happy New Year to you and to everyone that is joining us. This is a follow-up to our Dementia 101 webinar that we did in last quarter of 2021. So if you haven't seen that, recommend getting on to our YouTube page and taking a look at that. It was really good. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kyrié. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me. For those that are joining us for the live webinar, if you have any questions, there's a control panel on your right-hand side. Type your questions in. Time permitting, we're going to do everything in our power to get your questions answered. So that being said, Kyrié, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Jason. So happy to be back. And yeah, as Jason mentioned, we did a Dementia 101 where we covered sort of the different types of dementia and what a dementia diagnosis means. So definitely check that as a primer for this. And then this webinar really is, when I'm working with families of people diagnosed with dementia or someone has received the diagnosis themselves, there just seems to be a lot of confusion about, there's this myth kind of that you get this diagnosis and then we sort of go straight to worst case scenario, very much, end of life, not, really knowing our loved ones, all of the, I don't even want to like speak out all of the tragedy narrative into this space, but you've all seen it, like the absolute worst stereotypes you can think of. And people tend to think like, oh no, I have this diagnosis, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and it's going to be this terrible situation. And that just isn't what's true. And so the thing that I feel like can be most helpful is to think about, what does the journey of dementia look like? So depending on when you're diagnosed, you're going to be at a different point with dementia. So you might get your diagnosis right as you're starting to notice cognitive change, or you might get your diagnosis, later on. And so just one more word of priming before we sort of dive in is that what we're doing today is going to be based off of what's called a FAST score, which stands for Functional Assessment Staging Tool. And so this is a tool that is used to figure out what stage, if you've heard that languaging before, of dementia someone has, both yourself or someone else. This tool is used to be observable, so a primary care partner can use it. I'm a little leery of direct stages because everyone's experience of dementia is different. And that being said, it is really helpful to sort of know where on the trajectory you are. So sort of know I'm coming at a place of balancing that, of like recognizing we all have this desire to feel a little bit more comfortable about like, what's coming next? Where did I come from? But know that in my ethos and philosophy, I see dementia more as a journey than a disease with stages. I actually don't see it as a disease, which we've talked about before. So that's a little bit of priming. Also, remember that the type of dementia you have, so go back to that Dementia 101, is going to change how fast you move through these stages. So for example, Alzheimer's is a pretty slow progression form of dementia. So it'll take someone diagnosed with Alzheimer's 8 to 10 years to get through all of these different stages of dementia that we're going to be talking about. And just remember, everyone is different. There's a lot of compounding factors. So with that, where do we start? We start with before we even have dementia. Prior to dementia is the first place that we start. So many people listening to this, including myself, are going to be in this phase. We're in the prior to dementia phase. We have no cognitive decline. And all that means is that our brain is working the way that it has always worked. What do we want to do when we have no cognitive decline? This is the time to make our dementia plan. So while you might not be living with dementia now, everyone listening to this call either has a diagnosis or might in the future. So I've done this for myself. No matter what age you are, no matter what your cognitive ability are, think about what you would want if you did have cognitive change and if you got a dementia diagnosis. What would your care wishes be? Would you want to age in place. Would you want to live in a long-term care community? Who would you want around you? Who would you want to care for you? Getting your advance directives and all of that paperwork in place. And we'll talk about some more resources at the end that can help you with this, but there's a blog I wrote we'll link to called 3 Steps to Do Before You to Prepare for Dying at Any Age. There's lots of great orgs out there to help you really think about what you want if you have a dementia chapter in your life. Also, be healthy. Right now, there's a lot of really confusing research around dementia. The one thing we do know is that our brain health, particularly the vascular part of our brain health, the blood supply to our brain health, matters. If you don't have good blood supply to your brain, it can't work as well as it wants to. How do you get good blood supply to your brain? You keep your heart healthy. You eat healthy foods, you exercise, all of the stuff that is super obvious, meditation. There's lots of, watch out for the quacks. There's lots of quacks out there telling you what you can do to avoid dementia, but just general healthy practices to keep your body and brain in good shape are going to help you avoid things like vascular dementia, are going to help you sort of be ahead of the curve to not exacerbate. So basically, if you think of your brain, if your cardiovascular health, you're not healthy and you're getting little mini strokes or things and parts of your brain aren't working anymore, and then you're also having dementia, you're going to sort of be starting from behind the start line, if you will. So we just want to keep our brain as healthy as possible. Also, be positive. There's a lot of amazing research, mostly by the researcher Becca Levy out of Yale, who talks about our attitudes around aging and dementia actually really affect our outcomes. So you can, even if you have the APOE gene that makes you more at risk for early onset Alzheimer's, you can reduce the incidence of that presenting itself, its onset, and how severe it is by having positive attitudes about dementia and aging. So just listen to more of my stuff and other amazing allies out there who are looking at not, acknowledging challenges, but also, focusing on what's possible. All right, so that's for all of us right now. Then what's going to happen? We might start seeing an increase in forgetfulness. And this is you're walking upstairs, and notice this is this is before dementia. This is a normal part of aging and cognitive change. Is you're walking upstairs and you can't remember what it was you went upstairs for. I'm actually pregnant right now, and I'm seeing an increase in forgetfulness because of hormonal changes, that are happening. So this is something that might happen throughout our lifespan, but also happens, leading up to an incidence of dementia. So I just really want you to remember that while everyone who does have dementia becomes forgetful, not everyone who's forgetful has dementia. So this is the biggest thing to do here is don't panic. And remember, all right, so what? If you can't find your car keys, don't panic. We just learned fear of dementia makes outcomes worse. Also remember, don't be ageist against yourself. When you were a teenager and couldn't find your car keys, or me right now pregnant when I can't find my car keys, I don't call it a junior moment. I try not to call it mommy brain. We're not trying to stigmatize and label these things. It's just forgetfulness happens. It's okay. If it starts to become a pattern, you can simplify your environment. You can use reminders, try Post-it notes, reminder apps. Smart home devices are really helpful. But the biggest thing is just take a breath and just start to figure out what you need to help you remember. Honestly, we all live in such a fast-paced world. It's really not conducive to us remembering. It's making us much more forgetful. We're so overstimulated. So simplifying things can be really helpful there. All right, next up, others are going to start to notice change. So as there's some mild cognitive change happening, especially when we're in demanding situations, we might slip up, so people might start telling us that we already told them that, or we might forget an essential recurring meeting or an appointment that happened. We might notice that it's a little harder to perform complex tasks than it was before. We might not be able to cook dinner while talking on the phone and making sure our dog isn't barking at the mailman at the same time. Some things just might become a little bit more challenging. So what do we do at this point? At this point, what you want to do is rule out anything that isn't dementia. So you want to check in, is your environment too demanding? Can we simplify the environment and help alleviate this? How are you feeling psychologically? We know anxiety and depression can increase forgetfulness. Is there some support that you could use from a coach or a therapist? How's your health doing? This is a great time to start a conversation with your doctor to rule out, like, are you having a reaction to some kind of medication? Is there some other health issue going on? Before you like move to dementia, you really want to make sure that nothing else is going on that might be causing these mild cognitive changes. All right, and then, so now we're going to be talking about someone who is in the early stages of dementia, where those other ones can kind of be related to other things. While they'll be present for someone on a dementia journey, they're kind of present for many of us. So early dementia starts with, you're going to start to notice a change in your ability to plan. So this is thinking about complex tasks, what we call executive functioning, again, from our Dementia 101 class, and they're going to become more challenging. So maybe, yeah, you're making that favorite recipe and you're noticing like you have to check the cookbook a lot more than you used to. Or you come home from the grocery store and you realize that you didn't buy some of the things you needed and you bought duplicates of things that were already in your fridge. That's the kind of stuff that you're going to be noticing. And it's just going to be harder to keep things sort of straight. And so at this point, a physician might give you a diagnosis after doing psychometric testing of mild cognitive impairment. So what do you do here? Again, don't panic. That's pretty much my advice for every stage. Just make stuff worse. Talk to your physician again, rule out other physical and psychological ailments. That's going to be pretty important all along the way. We want to make sure that it's not something else. Make sure you're being as healthy as possible. So kind of everything we've already talked about. And then you're going to want to find tools and technologies that are going to help you. So think about the things you want to do. So for example, of maybe you never had to take a list to the grocery store before, and maybe now you do. That's okay. So make lists. Again, check in on, I know Alexas are hugely helpful for people living with dementia and similar devices because A, they don't get sick of telling you things repeatedly, and they're really great for asking questions of. So really find all the tools that you need. And this is also the point to start having conversations with your loved ones so that you make sure you've gotten clear on your wishes way before you even started feeling extra forgetful. But now is the time to really make sure your loved ones are clear on your wishes since they're going to be the ones carrying them out for you. All right, so that's early. Now we're going to be moving into the middle of our journey with dementia. So what's going to start, how you're going to know you're here is others might start to notice a change in your attire and hygiene. Remember before we talked about other people might notice that you're more forgetful. Now this is like you're going to be getting some feedback probably from, you know, a spouse or a child of like, why are you wearing that sweater? It's July. Or when was the last time you took a shower? And you know, you might not be able. So to remember or notice, it's just these things get a little harder to remember. So yeah, you want to like look at those hygiene habits. So when this happens, hopefully someone tells you it kindly. And also be kind if you're noticing this in one of your loved ones. Know that this is something, right, for any of us that's going to feel really jarring and really disruptive. So it might not be noticeable to you if you're the one with the diagnosis. So also trust your loved ones there. And at this point, if a doctor was measuring your cognitive change, they're going to be able to notice a difference from your last appointment, and they might diagnose you with moderate cognitive impairment. So what do we do once this happens? This is the time to really get plugged into support. Find a support group, particularly one, you know, if it's a loved one living with dementia, find a group you can go to together. Find groups just for, you know, family members. Find groups of self-advocates living with dementia so you can normalize this experience and laugh it off too. It's really important. Just be like, yep, you know what? I wanted to wear a ball gown to dinner and laugh it off, and that's totally fine. Or I wanted to wear a sweater in July. It's Christmas in July. Having humor can be really helpful here. So really get plugged in to support. And then on a practical side, you can, you know, if you're the one who's living with the cognitive change, try to see reminders to change or bathe as kind and caring. Loved ones, try to present them in a kind and caring way. Be gentle, put yourself in your loved one's shoes and think about how it would feel, as a adult deserving of all that dignity have those reminders. And, when possible, honestly, roll with it and have fun with it. If someone, again, like, yeah, wants to wear a sweater, turn the AC down and embrace it. Someone wants to wear a ball gown, have fun. There's enough tough stuff around dementia. We don't need to get hung up on what clothes are the right clothes. All right. Next, and this part of dementia is going to have some different sort of sub parts. So now we're going to be moving into the place where there's really daily support needed in what are called ADLs, or activities of daily living clinically. But basically all this needs is that to make it through our day-to-day, we need a little extra help. So first, we're going to need a little extra help getting our clothes on and off. So you're going to know you're here because it's just going to be a little more confusing of like getting the pants on, the right way. Maybe both legs end up in one pant leg, and like arms of shirts when they're over your head feel a little bit confusing, and just sort of navigating and coordinating how to put clothes on is going to get a little bit more challenging. Especially things with lots of buttons or weird place zippers. I know I have like a shirt that has kind of like an overlapping back that even without any cognitive change, and my arm always ends up in weird places, that kind of stuff. You also, at this point, might need some reminders about what order to put things on. So we put on our underwear first and then our pants, not the other way around. So what do we do here? The best thing to do is get clothes that are super easy to match so that making outfits is easy. So, and organize them in the closet, like, and in the different steps too. So it can be really helpful to just sort of think about like, okay, if we're going to get dressed, sort of moving from from left to right, of like, start with the undergarments, then maybe bottoms, then maybe tops, just thinking about how the clothing is organized so that it's really easy to put on. Also getting clothing that all matches, wanting to pare down how many choices there are, and making sure they're all really cozy and comfy, and beloved by you. Think about what you want to wear, and also think about clothes that are easy to put on and take off. And increasingly, some companies, including like Tommy Hilfiger, just released a line of accessible clothing. Companies are sort of realizing that this is a market and are making clothes that are easier to put on and off. And so you just really want to limit the complex decisions that you're going to have to make to set yourself up for success. Next, we're going to need some daily support in bathing. And so what this might look like is you get in the shower, and again, it's these, like, you can see it's kind of the executive functioning of these steps in a row of like, does the conditioner go in first? Or later you get out of the shower and you realize I didn't shave my legs and I wanted to. There's just some like coordinating all of the tasks in the bathroom might need a little bit of help. So what do we do again too? First, we want to make the bathroom as user-friendly as possible. So often, as we have changes in ability, both cognitive and physical, our homes are actually what disables us. It's, people for all time, as they've aged, it's gotten more difficult, to step up really high and into a super slippery tub. That is not the person's fault. That is not a deficit of the person. Like, why is the tub so high and why is it so slippery? Is what we need to be thinking about too. So do what you can. This is also a really good, like, much earlier on too, if you have the means to do so. When you are making your care plan, if you want to try to stay in your home as long as possible, doing some minor renovations to make your home more inclusively designed can be really, really helpful. So we want to make the bathroom as user-friendly as possible. This means that it's easy to move around. There's no trip and fall hazards. It's, all that kind of stuff. We also want to, just like we did with the clothing, make it really obvious what we're supposed to do once we get in the shower. So we can label the different products, maybe with like 1, 2, 3, 4, or with their names really big, or imagery can be really helpful depending on how language is changing, which again, we talked about in Dementia 101. Depending on how receptive and expressive language are changing, images of what you do with the product might be way more helpful than the words or the numbers. So just depending on how your brain is changing, figuring out how to label the different bath products. Also, it can be really helpful to use stuff that is non-toxic and all natural so that if it ends up in a mouth, it's not that big of a deal. And also products that are all natural tend to also be more universal, so you can use it on your hair or your body, which is also a really great way to just set yourself up for success if it didn't have to have a really specific use. If you can find one product that you can wash your face, body, and hair with, great, then you don't have to remember where it goes. So again, you're probably seeing the trend here. It's don't panic, have fun with it, get creative. Next, we're going to start needing help with the different steps of going to the bathroom. So this might be like, do we, pull down our pants before we go to the bathroom? Or do we forget to do that? And you can see where that would cause problems. So again, here, a visual reminder of the steps can be really helpful, either in written words or in pictures. Simple drawings and photographs for cueing can be immensely, immensely helpful. I also highly recommend adding a bidet or bum gun attachment to toilets. Just makes cleanup more easier for when accidents happen. So there you go, visual reminder of steps, get a bidet or bum gun. Again, don't panic, roll with it, So after the different steps of going to the bathroom, we then might start forgetting to make it to the bathroom in time. So this is like, we're still gonna have control over our bladder and bowels, but we might forget that we need to go and have accidents. First thing you want to do here, anytime there is an accident, is check for a bladder infection or UTI. They show up really differently when we're older. They can even come with signs of psychosis, which it can be very distressing, very confusing, to be having some hallucinations and things. So you definitely want to check for UTI whenever there are any accidents first. If that's all good, just try to make trips to the bathroom more frequent is a great way to avoid forgetting, kind of getting on a schedule. So maybe you put up reminders around the house or one of your care partners reminds you to go to the bathroom. If accidents are leaks more than, full expression of bladder, up to 8 teaspoons, there are absorbent underwear that are not the disposable kind that are actually reusable that can hold up to 8 teaspoons of liquid. The brand that, no affiliation here, but the brand that I like is Icon by Thinx. They're really great. And it's also much less stigmatized. There's a lot of other ones too. But I highly recommend getting reusable absorbent underwear. It's way less stigmatized than the disposable kind, which can feel like diapers. And there's so much ageism around the infantilizing of older people. Even though we definitely have a parabola of life where there are distinct similarities, we want to really make sure that we increase that dignity and and that kindness. So yeah, again, check for bladder infections, make frequent trips, and get some absorbent undergarments. Then what's going to happen? Then we are going to forget to use the bathroom altogether. And what is such a shame about this too is that we don't stigmatize this in childhood, but we do stigmatize it in elderhood. And it can be really embarrassing. And so have a lot of compassion for the shame that is associated with this. And if you're working with yourself, really, work with a coach or a therapist to like talk through that shame, because it's really nothing to be ashamed of. It's a natural part of this progression. As a care partner, what you can do is be really in tune with your loved one's routine. So kind of similarly, again, not only to infantilize, but there are parallels here. Similarly, like we might do with a child who's learning to use the bathroom at the right time, we're going to know their routines and know when they usually go. So be in tune with your loved one. Do they need to go to the bathroom usually first thing in the morning? Okay, we'll help them get there and just see, hey, just give it a shot. See if you need to go. There's so much, we're so conditioned that when we sit on the toilet to release our pelvic floor muscles and eliminate anything that needs to be eliminated, just by sort of guessing when it's going to happen, you can kind of get in front of this for a long time. And then just remember that this can be really distressing for everybody involved. So that's why prevention is a preferred strategy, but we just want to really have dignity and gentleness. Be slow, be kind, and know that it's okay. And then we're going to move into the last part of the dementia journey. And this one also has some subsets. So as we're moving into the last part, what's going to happen is on a typical day, language is only going to consist of about 6 words. And now this is going to be different for different types of dementia and different person. Again, reference the receptive and expressive language portions from Dementia 101. Everyone's language is going to change differently. So some people might see language reduced to 6 words much earlier too. So just sort of know that that's okay. What do you want to do? You're going to get creative about how you communicate with your loved one. If there's 6 words, okay, how can we use those words? Know too that how many words we use and how many words we understand change at different rates. And so your loved one may only be using 6 words, but may understand many more. Or they may be using many words, but only understand about 6. So just sort of know that those don't necessarily correlate. But just be attuned to your loved one's shift in vocabulary and also be checking in on, okay, how much can they receive? And just get really creative about how you communicate. How can you use nonverbal communication? Notice their tone and intonation with the words. It really is amazing how much can be communicated when we don't get hung up on just the transcript of a conversation. In that same vein, what's going to happen after that is it's going to keep going down till all communication uses 1 word. One person I worked with only used the word thingy, and I cannot tell you how many conversations we had where the only word that he used was thingy, but the way he used the word thingy, the intonation in his voice, the repetition, what he was pointing at, his body language, really did communicate a lot more than you would think that it could. So you're going to be really paying attention to language and environmental cues, and you just don't try to force the person to communicate with words. Really figure out how to communicate without words as much as possible, and just follow your loved one's cues. Next, moving around is going to get a bit more difficult. So at this point, assistive devices like a walker or an arm might be helpful. What we really want to do is think about how can we maintain mobility as long as possible. So it's super tempting here to be like, oh no, like walking is harder for you. Let's like use a wheelchair to make sure you don't fall. Super duper well-meaning, but what that means is that actually the loss of ability to walk on our own is going to happen faster. So what we want to do is ask what is possible and help maintain that and support that with assistive devices. So yeah, you just want to kind of think about how can we keep doing what we want to do for as long as possible, and not over helping. Over helping leads to helplessness. So that's going to be the really challenging thing to balance here and breaking down tasks. Okay, maybe you can't walk around the block anymore, but can you walk inside of your home? And really keeping those abilities, as long as you want to be mobile, keeping yourself as mobile as long as possible with any sort of assistive support. Again, super important that your house doesn't disable you here, that you have nice wide hallways, things to hold on to, even floors. There's lots of stuff in inclusive design you can read about that. Next, sitting up straight is going to become challenging. So again, have lots of supports, pillows, braces, chairs that can articulate to help sort of hold you in them. You can use braces and belts to aid in sitting up. Really big disclaimer, never leave someone alone with a brace or a belt on. That then becomes a restraint and to stop someone from standing up out of a chair. And that is really dangerous and demeaning. But again, when sitting up is challenging, figure out what needs to be necessary to help someone sit up. Then what's going to happen next is facial smiling is going to stop. And I say facial smiling because just because the mouth, the muscles can't do this anymore, doesn't mean that we can't tell if our loved one is happy. So start paying attention to other mood cues. That might be certain movements of other parts of the body. It might be other ways the face is held, different noises. It's going to be different for everyone, but just start to have a different cue. And also remember that just because someone's muscles might not work to smile doesn't mean that they aren't still going to love to see your smiling face and still get that mirror neuron reaction. And finally, last stage, muscles no longer coordinate to hold our heads up. This is another really good example of where we, stigmatize this as we're older, but support it in infants. So, kind of there is definitely a return here. And at this point, this is the last of the, stages. If you don't already have a relationship with hospice, now is definitely time to start when I recommend working with a palliative care doc much, much earlier, to be honest, but that's a whole nother story. Right now, what you want to do is just focus on being as present as possible with your loved ones and just be with them. There's nothing to do in this stage. Just be with them as they transition from this life to whatever comes next. Just two final thoughts before we go to questions here. I just want to remind you that while it does feel like when we're talking about these in the staging, which is why I'm reluctant even, to bring them up, although I know they can actually help reduce a lot of anxiety, and they focus on what's changing and what's being lost. Dementia is not all loss. Self-advocates live with dementia tell us all the time to focus on what is present and really focus on what is possible. And there's lots of new things that also emerge in dementia, usually in more of the, psychospiritual realm. As our cognitive and physical abilities change, there is some growth that is possible in our spiritual and psychological well-being. So yeah, so focus on what is present, not what isn't present. And with that, to learn more, you can always reach out to me on my website. I'll send you all sorts of links. And then here are some things, these are some different articles and things that you can Google and find. Some articles are written by me and different colleagues that help sort of inform the information here today. And if you are listening to this and so it's not hyperlinked, feel free to email me. You can find me at kyriosity.com, KYRIEOSITY.com, and I'm happy to send you resources about this or about anything else you might be curious about.
Thank you very much, Kyrié. We have a couple questions here. First question is, do we know how often dementia is misdiagnosed?
I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I don't know that we even really could know the exact number, but what I will say is, I would almost say probably all of the time, because we know so little about it, would be my kind of answer, is that we know so little about what causes dementia, what dementia is, and we're really trying, but really even our diagnoses are more just symptom sets. So I would say a lot of the time it is misdiagnosed. The thing that we really want to make sure to with the misdiagnosis though is kind of what I mentioned of don't just think because I'm forgetful, it's definitely dementia. So I really want to encourage people to make sure that all their other health is checked out, because there are things, whether that's side effects from medication, like I said, depression, anxiety, stress, hormonal changes that can mimic some of the symptoms. And so you really want to rule out all of those things. And you're going to be fighting, a lot of times some ageism in doctor's offices. So often people are like, oh, well, you're this age, they're treating your age and not the person. You're this age, that's why you're forgetful. So definitely don't dismiss, don't let yourself be dismissed because of your age, and make sure there's nothing else going on with your health.
Yeah, there was a follow-up question to exactly that last part, which is, if I have a family member and their doctor just says, oh, you're just getting older, you're fine. What do you recommend, maybe about a second opinion? What do you think they should do?
Yeah, that's really tough. So there's a great book called Treat Me, Not My Age, that I would highly recommend reading just to arm yourself with facts and articulation, if possible, which I know, it's not like we all have these choices, right? So ideally what you would do is find a geriatrician, which is a doctor who specializes in working with older people. They tend to be less ageist, although not all of them are, but, finding one who isn't ageist. would be the best thing that you can do, finding someone who is going to treat you and not your age. Um, and if that isn't possible, then, really arming yourself with knowledge about ageism so that you can self-advocate. One joke I love that one of my mentors, Ashton Applewhite, says is, she stopped blaming her sore knee on, being 63 when she realized her other knee was also 63 and wasn't her.
Yeah, so true. The last question talks about the caregiver. Now you've touched on that throughout this wonderful presentation, but and you provided some great resources. But Kyrié, how does somebody emotionally or mentally prepare for watching their loved one go through this?
Yeah. It's a big question. I would say the biggest thing to do to prepare is to build a team of support. This is a really big life phase transition. It's something that is, the challenge of which is compounded by our culture's ageism and ableism. There's a lot of tragedy narrative and stigma and stuff too. And so I really encourage you have your own therapist to work with. This is a process of grief and loss, right? Like any change like this is going to be your loved one. While I value people living with dementia immensely, it is a massive change. And so the loved one that or the person who you are, if you're the one diagnosed, is going to change. And so you're going to want to, while being present with what is and celebrating that and appreciating that, also grieve the loss of what was. Grieve the loss of the potential future that you'd imagined that isn't coming to pass. And so really getting support around that. I would say both individually, working with a psychotherapist who specializes in grief work, as well as support groups are really helpful to just know that you're not alone in this. It can be immensely soothing to know that, oh, other people are experiencing this too, to see how they're navigating it, and to move through it, with a lot of love and gentleness and kindness.
Great stuff. Thank you, Kyrié. Did you, I know you gave your website. Is there any other contact information or
You
for
can use
you?
the contact form on there. I think is
Okay.
probably the easiest. That goes right to my email, and I will email you back. I have a pretty unique name, so I'm pretty findable on the internet.
Well, very good. Well, as far as knowledgeable aging, you can find all of our upcoming and archive webinars on our website, knowledgeableaging.com. I encourage you to go to YouTube, type in knowledgeable aging. We update that a couple times per month, so subscribe. That way you can catch the latest webinars that we have with like Kyrié and others. If podcasts are your thing, you can find us on Apple Tunes, Spotify, etc. Till next time, I'm your host, Jason Kotar. This is Knowledgeable Aging.